I can buy weed almost anywhere, whether it's from the street corner or the guy down the street. But my experience with cannabis, well, this is different here. This is not like anything else that I've been able to be exposed to. And we believe, I come from the hospitality business, that kind of hospitality approach, that kind of one by one, grassroots word of mouth approach. Well, that's how restaurants are built. And we believe that that's going to be our staying power, both for the short term and the long term.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of The Dime. I'm Brian Fields. With me, as always, is Kellen Finney. And this week, we got a very special guest, Gibran Washington, CEO of Ethos Cannabis. Gibran, thanks for taking the time. How you doing today?
Doing great, guys, man. I appreciate having me on here with you today, guys.
Excited to chop it up. Kellen, how are you doing?
Doing well. Thrilled to talk to Gibran. Really excited to talk to East Coast Cannabis. I'm not even going to try to hide it, right? The East Coast all the way. I'll just represent the West Coast out here. How are you, Brian?
I love it. We'll get Gibran quickly on the record from the New York standpoint. I think it's great to have another one out here. I'm excited. And I think what's more important is the medicinal side. We're going to talk about today about cannabis. I think, as I was sharing before, sometimes it kind of gets overlooked or forgotten or not prioritized enough from the importance of what's going on. And I love, some of the work that Gibran's doing. So quickly, before we get into it, East Coast, West Coast, put yourself on the map and your loyalty. Where are you putting it?
For music, for cannabis, for athletics, if we're talking about cannabis, if it's grown in a basement, not in the regulatory system, I believe that East Coast Cannabis can hold its own. As long as on the West Coast in the regulated market, they have 100,000 CFUs. They're allowed to grow for 12, 16 weeks, so their crop's going to be a little more pungent. But I'll take a basement grow on the East Coast versus a basement grow on the West Coast any day of the week.
That was a very PC answer, but also very, very nicely laid. So, for our listeners unfamiliar with you, can you give a quick background about yourself and how you find your way to the cannabis space?
Yeah, so I think, I don't know if I found my way or cannabis found me a long time ago, but, my road with cannabis has been a long one. I guess some would say I'm a lifer in that regard, where, I smoked my first joint when I was 10 with one of my older brothers. And that kind of started my introduction and kind of my journey through cannabis. Throughout high school, throughout college athletics, I used cannabis. My brother, unfortunately, was a little bit ahead of his time, and he died in the war on drugs with cannabis. My father, who was a big-time executive for a corporation, he allowed himself to use cannabis for cancer treatment. So I had this bifurcated experience with cannabis, and, I think the dog must have liked it. I had this bifurcated experience of cannabis kind of growing up, where I saw the quote-unquote illegitimate side of cannabis. And then I saw the medicinal side of cannabis, and two individuals that I respected and loved and admired even to this day were into this industry that a lot of people had these negative connotations to. So as I got into college, and painkillers became the motive of pain relief for a lot of college athletes, I leaned into CBD. I leaned into some of those things early on. And then throughout my professional career, I was kind of always known as a guy who went home early. Because happy hours don't been my thing. So, between like 4 and 7, I'd maybe have a club soda and maybe some vodka with you. I disappeared. But I didn't go to bed. I went to go smoke cannabis, but you can't smell like weed and then be in corporate America. So I just became known as the responsible guy. But I was upstairs, having the munchies and watching TV while everybody else was down there at happy hours. So when cannabis came calling, it was a natural draw, and I was naturally interested in maybe joining a company like Ethos. But the negative connotation around, what it would do to my career and still where it was, wasn't necessarily where I wanted to align myself with yet. And then we had a lot of different conversations and talking with our former CEO, now the chair of our board, David Clapper, to focus on the medical research and being the first in the country to have a medical research partnership with Thomas Jefferson University or any medical institution, was really a big draw. And the fact that we were going to focus on the therapeutic elements while researching them and finding use cases to be able to apply them was very appealing. Now it became more than just, smoking. It became a real medicinal journey for me. And really understanding, from my brother's experience, my father's experience to what I went through, how could I bring all these experiences into cannabis? And luckily enough, I came in as a vice president. And then within 12 months, I was able to kind of move from vice president to CEO and be able to kind of take over this wonderful organization.
there has to be a feeling when you first were coming into the industry of thinking about the role and the concepts of the change you were making and just kind of looking back now. I always love that reflection aspect. Is there something that surprised you or shocked you, just the way the industry operates, the speed, the challenges, anything like that? The first thing that comes to mind.
The first feel was I'm home. That was the first emotion that I felt when I walked into the first, large grow house that was ours was I'm home. Some of the things that you mentioned were a little shocking, in terms of the lack of technology, the lack of access to some systems that I had been accustomed to using across my career. They don't really exist in cannabis, or, a spinoff or a knockoff version of what I was used to. So that was a big shock. But the thing that probably impressed or shocked me the most was the people, and their passion for the plant and their passion for this fight. Because, we've all woken up every morning if we decide to be in this industry, and we've openly said that we are going to break federal law, because we believe our mission and our purpose is greater than the current situation that we find ourselves in. So, finding a group of people that are like-minded along this journey was probably the biggest just wow moment, to say like, oh, all y'all are crazy. All of y'all are going to go out here and break the law with me was a huge, feather in the cap to say, okay, hey, there's more of us out here. And it was a good feeling.
With that in mind, how did you then kind of convince an established university to kind of jump on board too with that whole law-breaking mentality?
So luckily, a lot of the groundwork was laid by our former CEO, David Clapper, and his vision for the organization, what he wanted. Didn't have a lot of what I would call cannabis experience or even exposure, up until he got into cannabis. But he took a different approach than I would say most of the suits take. David, I don't look at him as a suit. He's really down to earth, but he didn't have a large experience with cannabis, but he understood that this plant was medicine. This plant historically for thousands of years was a medicine. So let's keep that thought process as we develop this company. And we went out for our clinical registrar license in Pennsylvania. We just kind of have honed in and held on to that initial thought that, this is what we need to do. So he had introduced himself to Thomas Jefferson University through some of our board members. And, luckily, Dr. Proportion, was one of the lead oncologists over there, was also working towards some of these kind of conversations in her field. So the marrying of the two of them was perfect. I got to inherit that relationship and kind of figure out how to evolve it, how to bring products into the market, which we're going to start doing this year and going into next year, that are based in research. Not the survey-based research, but the actual hands-on clinical-based research that we've been able to do in Pennsylvania. So that's kind of how the journey kind of went along, and convincing them, I think was easy or was hard. But Thomas Jefferson has proven itself to be a little bit forward-thinking as it pertains to cannabis, and a lot of the other medicinal approaches they take. We're talking about oncology and pain management and things of that nature. So it was a right relationship for both of us at the right time.
I can only imagine they have to be a forward-looking university, because there's so many universities that are just taking a very different approach, of one that's not as open to those elements. So take us through the research process, some of the information that is going on, or maybe more of a higher level. Like, what was the goal of it? Was it to attack a certain areas and try to understand certain concepts, or is it more free open and say, hey, whatever you figure out, we'll go from there?
I think it's a little combination of both. So we started with, pain and sleep, obviously, are the two big ones. We talk about the use cases for cannabis. So, we're currently in one of our larger pain studies. Sleep study is coming next, but some of our initial pain results are showing that, from either a low dose or a high dose, there's huge impacts with cannabis. But the thing that is really shocking is the high dose of THC has a less of an impact on pain than high CBD does. But we are finding that CBD by itself is not what you want. But CBD with some other of those cannabinoids, whether that's the major cannabinoid like THC or some of the minors, that entourage effect of the multiple cannabinoids at once, that has a true impact on people's pain tolerance. The other one that we're starting to work on is going to be sexual wellness coming up next. So, when we find that you can sit down with someone and help educate them how to use a product, their experience with that product is usually a whole lot better than someone just kind of looking at a menu with 500 different items and saying, okay, let me pick this one. And then it doesn't work, or it's too much THC. And they kind of lose what they were initially setting out to do, which was either anxiety, sleep, pain, usually are the top three of what people are looking for when they kind of look at cannabis.
I think what you said is so important, right? When people have a problem and they're looking for a solution from a medicinal standpoint, their expectations are that the product that they're selecting will solve that need. And what your team is doing from a research standpoint is kind of going through like the kind of unknown aspect of it and figuring out, okay, which aspects do we need to dial in to deliver those results that we need. And I think that is so important because you're right. Some people walk into a dispensary and they have pain and they get a product and it doesn't deliver. And then their first thought is, maybe it's not cannabis that can help me.
Yeah, or maybe cannabis is, causing my anxiety, or it's causing me more grief or things of that nature. It's just like, well, no, some corporate suits, not at Ethos Cannabis, as I wore a suit for most of my career as well, believe that THC was the marketing tool for the cannabis industry because they didn't understand what cannabis was, not understanding that, I live in Florida now. I kind of grew up most of my life in Florida. I bought most of my weed in a public supermarket parking lot. It was in a cellophane bag with no name on it. And it was whatever the guy told me it was. And the way that I came back was after I used the product, did it work or not? It wasn't all this other glitz and glamour of the graphics on the packaging or the highest THC, because it was, did this product meet my use? And nowadays, we just chase THC, and at the same time, we've taught the plant to not produce all of these other wonderful cannabinoids. There's 117 cannabinoids that we know about today that's in the cannabis plant. We only focusing on one. I was probably smoking 16, 7% THC back then, and I was smoking stuff that could put you out for days. We've gotten down this gravy train of THC. And corporate America is the one who has missed the ball completely, saying that THC is the way to go. But we should be talking about all these other cannabinoids. Because if you're having trouble with sleep, don't take THC. You're going to be up having nightmares and dreams all night. Get some high CBN, or at least get a strain with high mercy in it. Some of these elements that, the original corporate cannabis folk went about to try to figure out how they can market and monetize this plant. So, we're starting to hopefully break through and have different conversations around cannabis, because I can do a blind test and give you the highest THC at 38%, give you a 20%er, you're probably not going to notice any difference.
The communication aspect is probably the challenging one for them. It was like the lowest hanging fruit, right? It's the easiest way of saying the more of this, the higher you feel. And that's like that direct lineage. And now you're facing that same kind of challenge in the other direction where people have associated those things so tightly together that now what you're trying to say, okay, you want a balanced approach. It's an educational game that has to go on top now to really reformulate the whole approach so people understand when they buy something, doesn't mean the higher the better.
Exactly. And the educational thing is probably the hardest journey, because, sometimes you feel like you're alone. We've invested a lot in education, both internally and externally. Obviously, the research partnership, that's one element. But our LMS system and teaching our employees about cannabis is one of our biggest focal points. We have done more than 98% of the cannabis community, but we're 75% away from where we want to be as an organization, I guess you would say. Where we can do with our internal guests, which is our employees, and our external guests is probably what I believe is going to be our differentiator over the next 2 to 3 years, because people are going to start coming to us and asking questions and having real use cases for what they're trying to treat. And I don't care if it's our products or not. I really do not care. And I want people to get cannabis in their system in the right way so that you can figure out how to use cannabis on a daily basis, not just a once in a while, because cannabis can be used on an everyday standpoint if you know how to use cannabis. Now, if you want to be zonked out high all day, then yeah, this is probably not the best drug for you or substance for you. But if you're trying to treat and you want to get away from cigarettes, you want to get away from your anxiety, you want to get away from all these other things, there's ways you can do it and not be psychoactively intoxicated throughout your day, and you can have great days in between things, in between your activities, rather.
That's one of my favorite experiences when I give somebody a product and they look first for a THC and they're like, it's only 5 milligrams. And I'm like, just trust me on this, right? And then after, I can see the big smile on their face. It's got a few other things in there. And they're like, I don't really feel so disoriented. I just feel super relaxed and happy and having a great time. And I was like, that's the entire point. Right? Like, you don't need to go hide in the closet. You don't need to go cover up. You can enjoy yourself and be in a social setting and not feel uncomfortable and just feel a little more relaxed, enjoy it. And that is the part that I think is, I'm in agreement with you, is I'm the most excited about for the future. But the part that it's so challenging is, how do we disseminate the information, continue led by you, but how do we simplify it enough, given all the cannabinoids, given all the challenges? How do we share the information so someone like my mom or my aunt can walk into a dispensary and feel comfortable making the decision that they're going to get that same information needed in order to achieve that right product?
I think we have to start making products that, kind of are labeled, so that people understand what the use case is for it. If you think about any other, drug or substance, no one is trying to figure out all the different use cases for golden seal, echinacea, or for Oxycontin. They don't really know about the chemical compounds that make up that substance. So if you try to get into that, you're going to lose 98% of people. So simplifying and creating effect-based products and saying, this product is going to help you with X. That is the way you continue to educate one by one. In terms on a mass scale, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, I think there's a lot of individuals like me who are wanting to do some of these things, but until some of the larger MSO partners of mine decide that they want to shift the mechanism from, THC for THC, we're going to have a hard time from a national scale being able to kind of shift this conversation. But on a regional scale, we feel that we're doing a good job in Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, and Ohio. We're kind of changing that conversation and changing, that narrative. Our little retail business, as I like to call it, is our retail volume is twice the size of our retail footprint. So I think the guests are telling us that I will drive past dispensaries to come to your dispensaries for this experience, for this total encompassing experience. So we'll continue to show others that, there's something we're doing differently. That's why our stores are busier than yours, because we carry your products like you carry ours. But what happens when you come through our door is going to always be different. So hopefully more and more people will get into the educational element. I come from the food and beverage business, and educating people about, food, educating people about beer, that's natural. So I think in this mechanism of cannabis, or this industry of cannabis, why can't that be natural as well? Why can't you go in and ask somebody about a strain of cannabis the same way you ask somebody about a glass of wine? I'll bring out my sommelier, who's an expert or whatever it may be, to have a conversation with you. We're envisioning those kind of experiences inside of a cannabis space and doing it within 5 to 7 minutes. We think it can be done, and we're doing it time and time again.
And I think one of the biggest missing components of individuals who have tried to execute something like that has been your deep understanding of your guys' relationship with an institution that is providing actual research and backing. And so with that in mind, how do you get that information into your bud tenders' hands, right? Is there a weekly meeting where you guys go over the work that everyone's doing to create an information pipeline so that it can be communicated seamlessly to the customers? Talk us through that portion, right?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So, back on the restaurant guys, so we do shift meetings still. It's a thing. We believe in shift meetings and making sure everyone has the information that they need as it comes down the resource pipeline. Every time we have a strain come out, I also have to send you guys one of our strain cards. It goes into a real in-depth look of what this plant is and what this specific strain is, some of the use cases for it. So it kind of gives them somewhat of a starting point to be able to have some of these conversations. The big thing for us as we talk about education is based on data, because one of our lead growers says it all the time that, he only trusts God. Everybody else has to bring data. So we want to make sure that we're bringing good data to these individuals. So when they're talking to our guests, they're confident in what they're saying, and then they can feel like they can back it up with good data behind what we're talking about.
I love your shift meeting is your shift meeting is like a journal club too, kind of, it sounds like.
I love that you referenced your grower and trusting God at that. Everybody who's listened to this who knows a grower like that knows that type of person who's no, this is the only way. You must feel the plant and know.
Well, he believes that, you got to feel the plant, but he's got to trust data. He thinks that's the false fallacy of a lot of growers is you're trying to feel it all out in a plant that doesn't have stable genetics, that is very fickle, very temperamental. And you have to make sure that, what you're doing is tracked to some type of data or science, or you're going to be all over the place. But again, most companies don't grow like we grow. So we're going to drop in Pennsylvania probably about 80 different strains this year. And then when you talk about the different phenos, you're talking, over 100 probably different. We start dropping in some phenos in there. So, we're not just growing the what we think works. We're looking for the best cannabis that can possibly grow. So, we will go through that process every year as long as I'm running this organization until we have a stable of 30 fire strains in our premium category. And then the other 30 or 40 in our value brand is just as well as anyone else's premium. So until we get there, we're going to keep bringing in the best of the genetics.
That's a great competitive approach. And is that fundamentally rooted towards the science that your team's doing and saying, okay, we recognize these combination of cannabinoids deliver this effect. We want to try to have a strain that has this combination of cannabinoids?
Yeah, so we're looking for cannabinoids, terpene profiles, as well as, what is the makeup of the TAC, not THC, the total active cannabinoids, so that we can really figure out, how is this plant going to do well with us in our environment, in our structure. But then there's the other element of, there has to be some trust in some of the breeders that you're dealing with. Are we against someone telling us, it's fire? No. that goes on the scale as a vote. Fire is important. But some of the other elements, that kind of come with it are really, really, really important to us, like total active cannabinoids. What's the terpene profile? What is the average THC? Because we know we still have to sell it. Although I believe that 15, 16% is great sativa strains, but we still need to figure out, how do we get something that we love and the customer will buy? So what is that bridge gap to kind of make it go there? I mean, we're actually working, and sorry to kind of go off on a tangent, but we're actually working on our own sativa. We're bringing out some Acapulco Gold, some Colombian Thai and stuff like that. And we're nervous, some Durban poisons. And we're nervous because we don't know how they're going to test, although we know these are what everyone is asking for. What are you guys buying? So when those drop later on in the fall, like we have land-raised strains that we're going to give to you. You guys said you want to know what it's like from seed, land-raised. Here you go. Will you buy it? We'll find out. But we do believe that, 16, 70%, that's fine. That's perfectly potent enough cannabis from 98% of people.
Those customers that you're envisioning buying this product, do you have a way to attack them on your list so that when the strain does drop, since it's probably going to be a limited edition, that you can be able to provide it for them? Because I think in those instances, those people really want those strains, right? It's just about how do you communicate that information, disseminate it again to the right people at the right time so they can buy the type of product they want.
I mean, I think like all of us, we use a CRM. Obviously we have everybody's preferences in our CRM folders and our CRM files rather. So when certain drops come up, if you're a concentrate person, you're a vape person, you're a flower person, you're an indica person, you're a hybrid person, we know. So when things come out, we're able to kind of tailor messaging to you and kind of send things to you that specifically we believe that you'll like. But with these limited drops of sativas, to be honest with you, we're dropping them to everybody in the loyalty programs that are in our mailing list just because we want to get these in people's hands, kind of show them a lot of different things. One, the fact that, this is the cannabis that you grew up on. And then two, this is fine cannabis if you just want to try it. I would love to take the labels off and just give it to people. But we do want enough people to give tries and give us feedback to say, okay, do we drop another 10 crops of this? Because 50 people won't allow me to drop, a whole room of sativa strains. So we need enough of the masses when we do this to try this product at least and say, okay, does this work for me or not? Because I think we'll all be surprised. We've all been lied to. Because, testing is all, we wish it was objective, but it's very subjective. Let's just call a spade a spade. You can go to 4 different testing facilities and get 4 different results. I really want people to kind of, those are the facts. For those out there who have wondered, what kind of happens, it's frustrating for someone like me running a multi-state cannabis company. Like, what are we doing?
It's impossible.
Shopping tests is something that we don't believe in, but, as we look around who has the best results, we're human. So, that shouldn't be a thing. This should be a standardized process that I think would change it all.
It shouldn't be a for-profit space, in my opinion, but that's a different tangent. You know what I mean? It's just tough.
I think like what you were saying, like the concept of you're looking for an objectionable data point to use to understand, and what they're really telling you is like, well, what do you want it to say, right? Like how high do you want this to go? And that's the problem.
And not in so many words. Obviously, they're little, they don't just say, hey, what do you want? I don't think it's that, wild, wild west. No, but if you just send it without even calling or talking to anybody and you send it to 3 different testing facilities, why you get 3 different results, I don't know. Why do you get different terpene profiles? I don't know. I wish someone would be able to kind of sit down and explain it to me how I sent the same exact batch to you. And the testing results vary from, 5 to 8%. I think that all states probably should be like Colorado. Just give a range on it. Stop all the line. Let's just go, it's 20 to 35%. The hell with it. Let's just call a spade and just be done with it instead of just trying to put this specific number that's going to tell you so many things about this plant, where the things that you really want to know about the plant is actually not in THC. And we've been teaching our customers that, and it's been working. To say, okay, guys, stop looking for THC, look at TAC. And the difference between THC and TAC, that's the strain you want. Whatever that difference is between THC and TAC, that's the cannabis I want. Like if it's 18% THC and 27% total TAC, like I'm buying all of it. I want every last bit of that because it has so many other these minor cannabinoids that I want. I want some CBGA. I want some THCV. I want some CBN. I want some CBC. I want CBD. I want all the entourage effect to happen in the plant. I don't want 0% of this and 0% of this and 0% of this and then all THC.
And TAC is catchy too, right? Like it's a catchy acronym.
It's a real catchy acronym. You know what I mean? And we have we're actually going to change uniforms. One of our uniforms is going to change and we're going to do 2 things. Ask us about TAC. And the other one is, no remediation. I mean, like that's a thing,
Yeah.
that I think a lot of us don't ever want to talk about, or at
No.
least the corporate MSOs like myself don't want to talk about the fact that we don't own a microwave, do you? So that's one of our big claim to fame. We don't own remediation equipment. We never will. Why do you need to? Learn how to grow.
Do you want to explain what that is, just in case someone's not familiar with that word?
Yeah, it's basically when you're taking cannabis that's not grown to the regulatory standards that whatever state that you're in has set for you, and then that grower or cultivator decides to, instead of putting that in a processed product, which would help get rid of whatever that mold or materials that may be in there, but instead a lot of corporate MSOs and some regional MSOs or just regional, just local single state operators, they end up throwing it into a microwave because they don't know what they're doing. And they kill everything in the plant. Terpenes, they kill THC, cannabinoids, as well as whatever else they're trying to kill in the plant, mostly mold. Then they put that in a jar and they sell it to you. There's not a lot of companies that will stand in front of you and say, well, if you ever bought something from me, you never had it in microwave. And it passed all regulatory tests, although it's 10,000 CFUs on the East Coast versus 100,000 on the West Coast. We're still able to pass tests and give you great, what we feel is West Coast style growth.
The tech is so sticky, right? That aspect is just kind of like linger in my head, just thinking about like asking the tech. And that's such a smart approach, right? Because someone's walking in assuming they're going to buy something on THC. And if they didn't know about tech, now they ask because it's very catchy. And then they understand, okay, I should be buying based on this. And then the best part about that is the social kind of share when someone goes, oh, I got this great product. Where'd you buy it? And now it can be explained back. And they say, oh, the person was super helpful. He walked me through this process. But he gave me something that actually delivered on the effects that I was looking for versus my other experience. And I think that's a type of wave that happens where people start understanding the components. And I tip your hat to that because that's a very smart approach and very, very sticky.
It's sticky, it is smart. Thank you for both of those terms, but it's slow. Because of the lack of abilities to be able to educate at scale with marketing materials and being everywhere with cannabis and marketing, it is a grassroots, hand to mouth kind of approach that, we're trying to figure out ways to accelerate it. But what we have found is that in stores where, you have a general manager who is gung ho about this approach, we're seeing year over year growth in, people are catching on, that this is important. Now, with price compression, yeah, you're hearing me that same stores are growing in revenue. And it's just like, well, how did that happen? Did something else close around you? No. People are coming in for this experience and saying, wait a minute, this is different. I can buy weed almost anywhere, whether it's from the street corner or the guy down the street. But my experience with cannabis, well, this is different here. This is not like anything else that I've been able to be exposed to. And we believe, I come from the hospitality business, that kind of hospitality approach, that kind of one by one, grassroots word of mouth approach. Well, that's how restaurants are built. And we believe that that's going to be our staying power, both for the short term and the long term. I want everyone to talk about Ethos Cannabis and the product lines, whether it's Natural Selections, Headliners, or 11 or Meg's County, and that flower product. But even more, I want you to talk about your experience when you come into one of our retail businesses.
Do you run like different like messaging campaigns in like the various states to see like the state? Like, is there those kind of like things that you guys are executing right now?
Oh, without a doubt. Whether it's for promotional activities or for messaging, whether it's from the chalkboard, whether it's from the TV screens, we try different approaches, depending on where we are, even in the state. We
So
believe
sometimes it failed in one state and it succeeded in another state. Is that a thing?
Say that again?
Just sometimes it like completely flop in like say Pennsylvania or Ohio and then it like succeeds over here.
Oh, without a doubt. Like Pennsylvania is way more permeable. The pace of it is
I like the
through
word
education. It's education. The ability to educate in a fully evolved recreational market like a Massachusetts, it's a lot harder to kind of get to the finish line because there are so many choices, whatnot. But we do believe that we find people in both that given time, maybe that's your first trip, your second trip, maybe it's your third trip, that you do want to have that conversation. So we give our pharmacists the ability to be able to give consultations in every business that we run. We're also trying to figure out how to give consultations from our pharmacists across the country. Because we also feel that's a need that a lot of people are not servicing is they do have like TAC, terpenes, whatever that may be. What does this messaging mean? I'm scared to ask a question and to someone in the store. That's still a thing. So, finding the right messaging, depending on what state you're in, the right approach for that individual guest is something that we're constantly trying to tweak and figure out because it isn't a one size fits all. Because you have all these folk that say, I know everything about cannabis. I've been smoking for 40 years. And it's like, all right, well, okay. We're going to talk to you on the 10th time. But the person who's coming in nervous, heard about cannabis, they're real hungry to all the information you want to give them. So you want to make sure their start with cannabis is perfect or as close to perfect or ideal for them as possible.
Can you set up for our listeners, like just the different markets you're operating? Because we think we talked about Pennsylvania and Ohio, and I just want them to get like a depth of different ranges, because the challenges what Kellen alluded to, I think, are so hard. And sometimes I think people don't realize how hard that is for someone like yourself trying to like juggle here, go fast here, also get this down all at the same time.
Yeah, so we're down to just 3 states. I know a lot of people think that's big, but we want to be much bigger, obviously, at least 6 or 7. It's probably our end goal. We never want to be in 20, 30 other states. We just don't feel that's a tangible footprint as long as there's not stable genetics in cannabis. We can get into that later, but we just don't believe that, you're being greedy, you're growing. There's no way you can find good enough growers to grow for you in 26 states. Like if you can, blessings to you. That means none of the rest of us have any growers. Um, but as you're looking at it from state to state, we're in Massachusetts, which is recreational and medical. We're in Pennsylvania, which is our largest state, which is only medicinal cannabis right now. And then we're in Ohio. We pulled out of Jersey, we pulled out of Maryland for different reasons. Well, not for different reasons, for the same reason, because we weren't vertical. If we can't control our supply chain, we don't really want to be in the state. We want to be as vertical as possible. Hence why you don't see us in New York yet. Until they figure out some of that piece. I don't think you should be a retailer or a wholesaler. You should have the ability to kind of be vertical if you can withstand it or you can afford it. So, those are the 3 states that we kind of operate in. We have a retail footprint, about 14 retail stores. We had about 16 at one point. About 3 more will probably open up this year to kind of get us up back to the numbers that we would like to be in. But that's kind of our footprint across all 3 states that we kind of deal with. We have grow facilities in all 3 states, varying from, a 7,000 square foot canopy all the way up to a 25,000 square foot canopy. You will never hear about anything more than a 50, 60,000 square foot canopy from us. Because again, it goes back into, quality over quantity. We don't feel that in a 100,000 square foot, 200,000 square foot canopy, you can grow quality cannabis because you can't physically be able to watch and treat the plant the way it needs to be treated with all the nuances that come along. So those that do, I tip my hat to you, but I guarantee you, I'd like to see you in a head-to-head blind taste test with our cannabis versus yours, because the best weed in America is going to be in the basement. I'm sorry. It's going to be in a small basement with a guy with 10, 12 plants. He's singing to them. He's talking to them. The music's playing the way they like it. He's hand watering everything. He brings in his buddies who also like cannabis to trim the plant. So there's nothing but love and passion that's ever touching the plant. Like that stuff matters. My grandmother's tomatoes were always better than the supermarket's tomatoes. Why? Because she loved them. And that's always going to be true about basement grows. So our best grow is the 7,000 square foot canopy. It just is.
So you have first off, that's 100% accurate. And it's hard if you don't understand, like once you see it and you understand the person who's loving those plants, you can see why those plants deliver. It's incredible thing. They should have a detailed documentary on that one day. But you have the grows, you have the dispensaries. Do you do extraction also? Is there any other parts of the supply chain that your team operates in?
Yeah, we do the whole supply chain. From delivery, transport, we have that in some of the states that we operate in. We also use third-party transports. We do processing, pre-rolls, any way or shape or form you can do the cannabis plant, with the exception of capsules. We walked away from tinctures a while ago as we're trying to figure out different ways to possibly get back into that space. We do still do tinctures for our studies. We do hash rosin now. We're working on those different formulations where, we didn't want to get into a lot of that originally. I believe in the 5 guys approach, where, you don't need a large menu, but be damn good at the things you do have on the menu. So that was kind of what we were trying to dial in the last year and a half was let's be really good at our core business because everybody wants to go rosin. I'm thinking that's just it's a natural segue, but people forget how hard it is to make good distillate, let alone good live resin, let alone good concentrates. Let's be really good at that. And then let's get into hash rosin. That's where we are now. So we're kind of like the whole chain we can do. We decide what categories we like to play in because of, obviously different reasons. I'm a restaurant guy. So hamburger stand theory kind of thought process. I have these ingredients. How many things can I make with just these ingredients? How many menu items can we make before we start bringing in new ingredients and making new items that may be only a one-trick pony? So we really are trying to focus on efficiency here. And that way we can give, good quality cannabis at scale versus worrying about so many different lost leaders that a lot of other companies try to play in.
I love that you keep referencing the restaurant approach and the food and bev because I think taking from those other industries is so critical, because cannabis isn't the first industry to operate in the space, right? And there's all these other tools and technologies that you can apply in your space to make your job easier. And I think one of the things that you talked about earlier when we started was that they didn't have a lot of those systems. So is there other tools and elements that you're bringing in from the restaurant business for extraction or for cultivation in order to say, hey guys, like we want to expand and find tools from other industries in order to try to make your current job easier, better, more efficient?
Yeah, we're nerds over here, so we're always trying to find the best technology. So bringing some of the inventory management systems from retail that I used in the past, and some of that processes that we've used in the food and beverage sector. But unfortunately, a lot of those systems they won't play in cannabis because we're so federally illegal. So we're trying to find patchwork and bridges to kind of take some of these theories and bring them into fruition. So the team is full of a bunch of brilliant people who have done different things internally, as well as bringing external consultants to kind of help this bridge and this patchwork. The biggest thing from the food and beverage world that I think that I brought and kind of reinforced is the service element. I'm a servant leader. I think anyone that works for me will tell you that he's a huge servant leader. I believe in the upside down triangle, where, the most important person is the least important person on the triangle. And that's myself and everyone else. We should be out here serving, one, our internal guests and then our customers. And I think that approach in the restaurant business, when we talk about that, that's probably the biggest thing that I brought was that service, true service. Because if you've never worked in the restaurant business, have someone yell at you, cuss at you, and then you still have to smile with them and treat them like a human being, you don't really get it. So taking that mentality and putting it in cannabis with a lot of folk who are moving fast, who are in an industry that's emerging and growing, was huge for culture and huge for inexperience with the plant itself, because now everyone is, especially in the grow, they're thinking like chefs. Is my plate perfect? Is there anything else that I need to do to make sure this plant is perfect before I let it go? And they're taking that kind of fine dining experience all throughout our value process, our value chain, or our supply chain process, rather. And then it ends up in the guest hand, and then the PAs, the product associates, the bud tenders, they're giving that same, hopefully fine dining type of experience and just cultivating a special experience for you.
People know throughout the supply chain that the expectations are high and that it's not like as fast as possible. It's make sure you do it meticulously and right every step of the way. And I think, as you've displayed perfectly, is that when you communicate to the customer, they recognize that and they appreciate that. And that is one of the reasons that they can drive an extra 10 minutes to come to your dispensary.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. And I think, my shirt, it's a slow plug here, but this is our theme. And, better is better. We believe, from my favorite poet, may the best of your yesterday be the worst of your AKA Sean Carter. As you, for those of you who don't know, that's Jay-Z. Sean Carter. As we look at that philosophy or that concept, better is better. That's kind of our thought process. Is we're not looking at the external world and saying, okay, what are they doing good? What are they doing better than us? It's how can we get better on what we're doing right now? So we had a great day yesterday. That's great. How are we going to make it better tomorrow? And that constant improvement approach, that little bit by little bit approach, those micro wins, we believe in them around here. And we believe that failure is just going to be part of our journey towards success. It's not terminal. So better is better. That's kind of our philosophy throughout the organization.
Another item that would be better is if Pennsylvania went adult use. Is there any hope for upcoming changes or anything that you can share with us there?
Well, I learned, I don't know, from a movie or from a talk, but hope is not a viable business strategy. I think, I hope about a lot of stuff. I'm going to go buy a lottery ticket later. I hope I'm going to win that too.
Me too.
We feel as though that, the journey towards recreational cannabis in Pennsylvania is well, obviously overdue. We do know there's a cliff in 2027 financially for the state of Pennsylvania where they're going to need more tax revenue. And what better way to get more tax revenue to continuously to tax us in the cannabis industry? But we know we can fill that hole for them. They seem to be able to bring down some of the barriers relates to the recreational elements of cannabis. And we think whether it's this year or next year at the latest, it's going to happen. The governor's behind it. We feel that both the House and the Senate in Pennsylvania are both leaning towards that way. They just got to figure out what the language is going to look like. The state store model was a non-starter for all of us in the industry, but we understood that was a part of the political process that we kind of had to get through. But there's some great bills that we feel are coming to bear here that are co-written that we feel should get through both houses and create a recreational cannabis program in the last state, really in the largest state in the Northeast that's not recreational.
Is that part of the job that is more surprising, kind of going in, understanding like the political dynamics? Because what you've outlined is like the scientific behind it, the rigor and the understanding of that should be super compelling, right? Like that should be compelling enough where someone has all those previous fears, recognizes the data, says this can make a big difference with the texture. I know that's logic and I know we don't operate there, but that's the way my brain thinks.
It does. And unfortunately, we're not in politics.
Fair.
So, as we think about our politicians, both locally, regionally, or on the federal level, we have to understand they're human beings and there's lobbyists that are giving them money for their campaigns and driving the narrative differently. And, unfortunately, in American politics, it's about money. Big pharma is against us. One of the largest advocates against recreational cannabis in any state or across the land is the federal prison union, lobbyists. So, there's a lot of people, alcohol and tobacco don't want us. So, and there's a lot of individuals. And then obviously you have some people who have had horrible experience with cannabis, and maybe cannabis is the worst thing ever. It's the devil's lettuce. It's probably what they still call it. So, all of those individuals, they have voices as well, as they should. But we believe that science and data should always win out. But unfortunately, I think there are special interest groups that have kind of gotten in the way of that on the local, federal, and state level. So, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Like this is better than alcohol. This is better than cigarettes that you're buying. I mean, the Surgeon General at the end of last year said alcohol is the third leading cause of cancer. And who's still drinking it? So like it makes no sense to me how this substance, which no one has ever overdosed on, no one has ever said causes cancer. Matter of fact, it may do the opposite. But again, we can't say that as in any certainty. But I do know Rick Simpson is a person. My father is a person. I know people who use cannabis as part of their treatment and had great results, with cannabis and whatnot. So I don't get it, Ryan. But if you try to apply logic to politics, your head will explode. There's a reason why they're lifelong politicians and not lifelong business people. They wouldn't crack it on the outside, I don't believe, because, they're going to have to make real decisions that are going to impact them both the short term and the long term.
The Surgeon General coming out and saying it's number 3. Some people were like, well, at least it wasn't number 1 and number 2. And also that cycle went away so fast. They were like, this is out. And then they're like, it's gone.
You don't see any commercials around it. You don't see anything.
Come on.
The fact that, it is the
No
third
public health campaigns.
Third leading cause of cancer and the number 1 leading in vehicular homicides.
Top 5. It's bad.
You know what I mean? So I don't know how else. The nation can hear it and how many different ways they can hear it to say that cannabis is safer than what you've been using. Whether you're drinking it, you're smoking it, you're consuming it 6 different other ways you consume cannabis in, it's a safer product formulation for you than anything else that you're probably taking. It's definitely safer than your Oxys. Definitely safer than your Xanax. Definitely safer than your Ritalin. No one is taking cannabis and then having to get liver pills because of their cannabis intake. Number one is taking, taking this for, high blood pressure, and all of a sudden their heart doesn't work the same. So the knock-on effects of cannabis is just a lot less. I'm not saying it's a perfect plan. I'm not saying it's a cure-all. I am saying that it has to be a real conversation that we're having around the therapeutic application of what this plant can do for day in and day out life. And we got to stop putting it in this box that is the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, science and data definitely leading out. And it's hard to argue with that, right? At the end of the day, it doesn't have to be about personality, it doesn't have to be about experience. Just look at the science and the data and let that lead out.
I mean, we got a vaccine in 7 months without the data and the science. They trusted that. You got a couple thousand years of cannabis growing, and people using it across continents. I don't know why they don't trust that.
Amen. Right there.
You got any new states you got your eyes on, or anyone that you think is a sleeper state? I know you want to be in more states and you're only in 3, so I didn't know if there's one you had your eye on.
Definitely have our eye on, places like Kentucky. We like limited license states, expanding our footprint in the areas that we were in. We believe that, that was the failure of a lot of MSOs. They went wide, not deep. We believe that you need to go deeper in the markets that you're in, own those markets. I forget exactly, I know you're in New York, but, there's no Wegmans south of DC. There's no Publix north of Virginia, but both chains do okay. We believe that we can do that same kind of philosophical approach where we'll be a regional powerhouse, where people hopefully will, when they come to the state or they're around the state, they're looking for our products because they know in this area this is the best of the best. I go back like my brother, and I grew up smoking cannabis. I've never met a drug dealer to control all 50 states. You can control a city, you can control a block or two, you control even maybe a region, have some of the best cannabis, but you can't control the entire country. So it's a fool's errand. There is 2,000 different genetics that I house in my little small business. So if you think that you're going to come up with some strain that you could just grow every day of the week and that everyone's going to buy, good luck. Khalifa Kush is only really popular on the numbers is because True Leaf has 150 stores in one state, which we can talk about until I'm blue in the face, how crazy and criminal that is. But that's why Khalifa Kush is so popular. It's not because, she's doing a bang up job in Massachusetts or a bang up job in Pennsylvania or any other states that she's operating in. It's because she has concentration in one state. So, I think if you look at Cookie's brand, he's the most popular brand around, and Cookie strains don't crush anywhere. Because it's not about that. It's about so much more of that in Canada. So we'll see where it all shakes out. Kentucky, Jersey, we love both of those states. We would love to continue to grow our footprint where we are. I would love to have 25, 30 stores in Pennsylvania, 8 to 9 in Ohio. And, if they allow the cap to come down in Massachusetts, let's go 7 or 8, and then, from there, let's just continue to get distressed assets that are already open. And add them to our portfolio. And, hopefully, our plan when we add distressed assets is to, kind of leave the name intact and hopefully the ownership intact and just kind of help them, continue their brand and their message they want to do. We don't want to be an organization where it's just all our names on the book.
Have you looked into that now? Because I think there's a sentiment feeling that a lot of teams are facing more and more trouble. So there could be more opportunities for distressed integrations.
Everything you read in the news is not always true. But the fact that the cannabis industry is about to go in default is very true. The amount of distressed assets that have come across the desk, unfortunately, are just at an all-time high. We got to figure out a way to help some of these smaller operators stay in business because they are the true heart and spirit of cannabis. And, unfortunately, the large organizations will continue to come in and, pick them off. But even the larger organizations and MSOs, I think you're going to surprise a lot of people in the next 4 to 6 months about how distressed they are. $200 million plus businesses that are failing horribly because of some of the decisions that they've made. So yes, we've seen a lot of assets. There are some conversations we're having right now about figuring out how we can expand our footprint, but it has to be the right deal at the right time. We do understand that, whether we're in this for the long term or the short term, you have to make good decisions because they're going to come back and bite you in the butt, either in the long term or the short term. We don't want to overpay for assets, and we do not want to pay for what you've already put into your business. That's not our fault. That was your decision, your investment, and some people just need to come to terms with the fact that they may have lost their money. And now they can only get, 25 cents on the dollar for their initial investment.
Well said. Last question. Tell us about the Pennsylvania Medical Marijuana Education and Research Summit.
Well, first, it's going to be the best one they've ever had because we're hosting it and we're running it, and we're going to have a very inexperiential conference, with some of the best minds in Pennsylvania as it relates to the research around cannabis. We have some people from the governor's office coming to give us some keynotes for addresses. And we're really just going to really talk and nerd out about the science of cannabis, a lot of the research we're doing, a lot of the research that some of our other partners in Pennsylvania are doing. We have other CRC licenses. And then also what we think about the future of cannabis in Pennsylvania, and then also across the country. So really it's a platform for us to really start having a formalized conversation that's truly interactive and truly hands-on with the participants around what this journey to cannabis is going through and what our role in that journey is, both now and then what we think we should be in the future.
I love it. So, Gibran, for our listeners, they want to get in touch, they want to buy Ethos products, where can they find you?
Yeah, ethoscannabis.com is where we are. All our socials are on there as well. We're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're on all the other social stuff. I think they even have an Instagram account for me, although I don't have social media. We're very easily found. And if you're looking for good education, please go to our Learn page. We have some of the best education around cannabis, whether you're in our state or not, whether you're shopping in our stores or not. Our job is to be a thought leader in the space. So please check out all the information that you can find online on our blogs and all of our Learn pages. We have what you're looking for, how you want it, and when you want it. We promise you that.
Love it. I'll link it all up in the show notes. Thanks for taking the time. This was a lot of fun.
I appreciate you guys. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.